Thank you, Governor. You can have a seat.
No,
There's some water over there.
I'm catching the wind here.
All right.
You're not getting me away.
All right. You need the breeze. Well, again, thank you for your commitment and your leadership on this legislative achievement. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Terry Macy, the Commissioner of the Department of Developmental Services, and the agency that, for all those of you who don't know, is responsible for the operation of the Southbury Training School.
Thank you, Ed. So this is a very special moment in Connecticut history, as we are here today to witness the transfer of nearly 800 acres of farmland from the Department of Developmental Services to the Department of Agriculture through the signing of Public Act 13-90, an act concerning the preservation of farmland at the Southbury Training School. There was a time when institutions like Southbury Training School, with large self-sustaining farms, dotted the landscape throughout the country. Today, this is no longer the case, leaving states with important decisions regarding the best use of these types of land. Connecticut has made a great decision by transferring the stewardship of this outstanding property to a state agency that is best suited to promote its preservation and conservation. I'd like to thank Governor Malloy for his leadership in this legislation, as well as Commissioner Levitsky and his staff, Representative O'Neill, and others who worked tirelessly over the last several months to make this legislation possible. Thank you very much.
Once again, Commissioner Macy, thank you for your forward-thinking approach to these prime farmlands. Now, a critical role in making sure these farmlands are effectively utilized will be played by the Commissioner of Agriculture, and I might add, the former First Selectman of the town of Ashford, Steve Rositsky. And it's my pleasure to invite him forward to say a few words.
Good afternoon. This is a remarkable day, and as I have said before, this is the crown jewel of farmland properties that the state of Connecticut has stewardship of. And we have worked with our partners over time to try to get to this place, but it took the stars aligning to make this happen. Working with our partners at the Southbury Land Trust, the advocates at the Working Lands Alliance, Representative O'Neill, the town of Southbury, and our farmer here who has been a steward on this land, Ed Platt. We worked to make this happen, but we wouldn't be here today if we didn't have the leadership of Governor Malloy. And having the stars align the way they have, and having leadership in the General Assembly, and having the superior leadership of our governor, this day is becoming a reality. And after the transfer of this property from the Department of Developmental Services to the Department of Agriculture, there will be a conservation easement placed over the land here to remain in agricultural production into the future. Prior to me becoming Commissioner of Agriculture, I was a property agent at the State Department of Agriculture. And I've got to tell you, it was very difficult working with the former Department of Mental Retardation, now DDS. And I want to especially thank Commissioner Macy for having an open mind and an open heart to work with us to make this all happen. So thank you all very much. This is a wonderful day.
Well, I just wanted to make a point with regard to what Steve said. We've already started talking with the Department of Agriculture about what happens next. Legislation is important. As we used to say in mathematics, it's a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient condition. We've got a lot of work to do here in terms of getting farmers back on the land and encouraging the kind of diversity of farming that I know Steve and his staff wants. And so we're already talking about creating a state and local oversight or advisory committee to help steer that forward, give people information locally about how they can get involved in farming. And I really hope we can bring farming back as one of the economic legs of this community the way it used to be. This can be the starting point for a lot of that rejuvenation. And I see some people here from the food industry, and that just all ties together with what we do from an economic basis of having our locally grown produce, our great markets and restaurants to use that. And we might come back and talk about that in a little while. But anyway, thank you, Steve, and I look forward to working with you. Now, when I first became first selectman, the first thing I did was, one of the first things was had a lunch with Representative O'Neill, Senator Kane, and Representative Labriola, our three congressmen, or our three representatives, to talk about how we could work together going forward, because we all knew that this was something we all wanted to see happen. And I really appreciated their support throughout this legislative session. Sometimes I have no clue what goes on up in Hartford. It's a complete mysterious black box for me, but I appreciate the fact that they were up there and made things happen. So I would like to ask Representative O'Neill, who's been working on this for, well, he'll tell you. And we appreciate all of his perseverance on this. Arthur?
I guarantee you this is 2 minutes. For those who've heard my speeches on the floor of the House. President Kennedy once remarked that victory has 1,000 fathers. Looking at all the beaming faces out here today, it is obvious that we are here to celebrate a victory. My commitment to protecting Southbury Training School Farm and promoting agricultural activities on it go back to my first term in the legislature in 1988, when I proposed legislation to preserve this farmland. My commitment to protecting Southbury Training School Farm has been a matter of persistence. And after 5 years, Governor Weicker finally signed earlier legislation that committed the state to some type of preservation of the land, that it was going to remain agricultural. Years later, the legislature passed a bill which I co-sponsored, creating a task force to study the future uses of all of the farms owned by the state of Connecticut. Among the members of that task force were Tom Kreider and Steve Ravisky. Their report proposed that those farms owned by the state should be preserved and protected through the use of third-party easements to nonprofit groups committed to land preservation and promoting agriculture. During the next legislative session, I proposed legislation to enact those recommendations, and I proposed it in each session afterwards, in 2011, 2012, and finally this year it passed. Thank you, Governor Malloy, and for the administration for supporting it. Special mention goes to now Agriculture Commissioner Steve Ravisky, and his assistant George Scrivda, who could not be with us today. He's busy taking applications for farm loss grants. And to Chris Smith of the Governor's Office, who is here somewhere, I saw him earlier, and to DDS Commissioner Macy, and to Christine Leo, your assistant, who's worked hard with me over the years on this project. And thank you to Tom Kreider and Ed Edelson for your support, and to Selectman Chad Landman and First Selectman Barbara Henry of Roxbury, who personally testified in support of this legislation. And I have a special thanks for John Erickson. I don't think I see John in the audience, but he's one of the people who came up and personally testified, spent hours waiting so that he could testify on the bill, and who has worked so hard for so many years to shepherd land into the land trust and to preserve it. It's always been a pleasure working with John. And also thank you to the people of the town of Southbury for your unwavering support throughout the years. This victory could not have been achieved without you. Thank you.
So with that, I'm very inexperienced in this, but I think we're going to have our bill signing here. And I think actually, Governor, while you're getting ready to do that, there is a presentation for you. As you might know, we